I can't go back to you, my friend. Don't even ask, don't play pretend.
I always thought our marriage was solid. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing prepared me for the day I discovered Julia's affair. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind that made you want to curl up with a good book and a hot cup of tea. I had just come home from work, exhausted but content, ready to unwind. Julia was out, supposedly on another business trip, and I decided to catch up on some emails before dinner. As I settled into my office chair, I noticed the computer was already on. Julia must have forgotten to log out. I moved the mouse to wake the screen, intending to switch users, when a half-written email caught my eye. The subject line was innocuous enough. Meeting follow-up. But it was the preview text that made my heart skip a beat. I miss you. My first reaction was disbelief. I stared at the words, willing them to change into something mundane, something that wouldn't shatter my world. But they remained stubbornly the same, taunting me with their simplicity. With trembling hands, I opened the email fully. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again next week. I miss you. The sender's name was Gabriel Bryant, a name I knew all too well. Julia had mentioned him in passing over the years, her first love, the one who got away. I had never thought much of it. Everyone has a past. But this was different. This was a present, an active betrayal. A wave of nausea hit me as I scrolled through the email chain, each message a dagger to my heart. They spoke of secret rendezvous, passionate nights, and future plans that didn't include me. Julia's business trips had been anything but professional. Just then, my phone buzzed, breaking my trance. It was a text from Julia. Just landed. Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you. The irony was too much. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and a deep aching sadness. I needed to talk to her, to confront her with the evidence, and hear her explanation, if there was one. I barely registered the drive to the airport. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, each more painful than the last. When I finally saw Julia coming through the arrivals gate, she looked the same as always, poised, beautiful, and composed. But now her smile seemed hollow, her presence a mockery of the trust I had placed in her. "Hey, you," she said, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that felt like a lie. "Miss me?" I pulled away, unable to meet her eyes. "We need to talk," I said, my voice betraying the turmoil inside me. Her smile faltered. "What's wrong, Anthony?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. "I know about Gabriel." Her face went pale. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the bustling airport around us fading into the background. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped, my anger finally breaking through. "That you've been lying to me. That our marriage has been a sham." She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. "Anthony, please. It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I echoed, incredulous. "I read the emails, Julia. I saw everything." She looked down, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." "Then why did it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Why did you do this to us?" She shook her head, unable to answer. The silence between us was deafening, filled with all the things we could never say. Finally, she looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "I still love you, Anthony. But I love him too. I don't know what to do." Her words hit me like a physical blow. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of her. "I think you should leave," I said, my voice hollow. "I need time to think." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Okay, I'll give you space. But please, believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you." As she walked away, I felt a part of my soul break. Our marriage was in ruins, and I didn't know if it could ever be rebuilt. All I knew was that the woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved for so many years, was now a stranger to me. I sat in the empty parking lot for what felt like hours, replaying our conversation over and over in my mind. The words, "I miss you," haunted me, a painful reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. That evening, the air in our home was thick with tension, an invisible fog that clung to every corner. I could barely hold it together, my mind racing with the words I had read earlier. Julia came home from her so-called business trip, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. She greeted me with the same practiced smile, but all I saw was betrayal. "Hi, honey," she said, hanging her coat in the hallway. "How was your day?" I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk, Julia. Now." She froze, her smile faltering as she looked at me. "What's wrong, Anthony?" I gestured towards the living room, and we both walked in silence. The walls, once witnesses to countless happy memories, now seemed to close in on us. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on my shoulders, and I knew there was no turning back. I turned to face her, unable to keep the pain and anger from my voice. "I know about Gabriel." For a moment, she just stood there, her face a mask of shock. Then, to my surprise, her shoulders sagged in what looked like relief. "It's Gabriel," she confessed, eyes downcast. "My first love." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "How could you do this to me, Julia? To our family?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for her. She looked at me, pleading for understanding. "I never meant for this to happen, Anthony. It just did. I'm so sorry." I shook my head, disbelief mingling with the hurt. "Sorry. You're sorry. That's all you have to say after all these years." She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Please, Anthony, you have to understand. Gabriel and we have a history. When he came back into my life, I was overwhelmed. It's like all those old feelings came rushing back." "Old feelings?" I echoed, incredulous. "We've been married for 20 years, Julia. We have kids, a life together. Does that mean nothing to you?" "Of course it does," she cried, her voice breaking. "I love you, Anthony. I love our family. But I love him too. I don't know how to explain it." "You don't have to explain anything," I said coldly. "You've made your choice clear." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "What do you want me to do?" "I'm willing to go to counseling, to try and fix this." I shook my head, feeling the last bit of hope drain out of me. "No, Julia. There's no fixing this. You betrayed me, and I can't just pretend everything is okay." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I understand." I watched as she walked to our bedroom, her movements mechanical, as if in a trance. She emerged a few minutes later with a suitcase, her face pale and drawn. "I'll go to a hotel," she said quietly. "Give you some space to think." I stood there, numb, as she walked to the door. She paused, looking back at me one last time. "I'm so sorry, Anthony. I never wanted to hurt you." Without another word, she left, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the house. I sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of the silence settle around me. The life we had built together lay in ruins, and I was left to pick up the pieces alone. The next few hours passed in a blur. I wandered through the house, our house, now feeling more like a stranger's. Every room held a memory, every object a reminder of what was lost. I found myself standing in front of our wedding photo, the smiling faces looking back at me from a different time, a different reality. How did we get here? I whispered to the empty room, but no answer came. I tried to sleep, but the bed felt too big, too empty. I tossed and turned, haunted by images of Julia and Gabriel together. The thought of them, the knowledge that she had chosen him over me, gnawed at my soul. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. But even in my dreams, there was no escape. The betrayal was a shadow that clung to me, a constant reminder of the life that had been shattered. When I woke the next morning, it was with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions. I knew that the road ahead would be long and painful, But I also knew that I couldn't dwell in the past. I had to move forward, for my sake, and for the sake of our children. Julia's betrayal had cut deep, but it would not define me. I was stronger than that. I had to be. In the days that followed Julia's departure, I found myself adrift in a sea of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion. They all crashed over me in waves, leaving me exhausted and numb. I had hoped for some sense of clarity, but instead, I was faced with the daunting task of navigating the murky waters of divorce. The first step was finding a lawyer. I sat in my car outside the office of Sarah Collins, a highly recommended family attorney, trying to summon the strength to go inside. Finally, I took a deep breath and walked through the door. "Mr. Clark, please come in," Sarah said, extending her hand. She was a middle-aged woman with a kind face and a no-nonsense demeanor. "I'm sorry for what you're going through. Let's see how we can help you." I nodded, grateful for her professionalism. As we sat down, she opened a folder and began to ask questions about our assets, debts, and the children's arrangements. The words felt mechanical, devoid of the emotional weight they carried. "Julia wants a quick resolution," I said, handing her the divorce petition Julia had left behind. "She only asked for her clothes and jewelry. She's left me with the house and the kids' college funds." Sarah frowned as she skimmed through the documents. "That's unusual. Most spouses in her position would ask for more." I shrugged, feeling a pang of bitterness. "I guess she just wants to move on with Gabriel." Sarah looked up, her eyes sympathetic. "I understand. But it's important to protect your interests. We need to make sure the financial arrangements are fair and that your rights are protected." I sighed, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "Honestly, I just want this nightmare to end. I'll give her whatever she wants if it means I can move on." Sarah's expression softened. "I know this is difficult, but rushing through the process can have long-term consequences. Let's take it one step at a time. We'll review everything thoroughly to ensure you're not left at a disadvantage." I nodded, appreciating her calm, methodical approach. Over the next few days, we went through our finances, documenting everything from the mortgage on the house to the kids' college funds. It was a painful process, each number a reminder of the life we had built together and the future that was now uncertain. One evening, as I was sifting through old financial records, my phone rang. It was Julia. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I was ready to hear her voice. "Anthony," she said softly, "I wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" I closed my eyes, the sound of her voice stirring a mix of emotions. "I'm managing, working with the lawyer to sort everything out." She sighed. "I'm sorry it's come to this. I never wanted to hurt you." "Yeah, well, it's a little late for that," I replied, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. I wish things were different." "So do I said, my anger giving way to a deep sadness. "But this is where we are now." We were silent for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us. "I'm staying at a hotel for now," Julia said finally. "Gabriel offered to let me stay with him, but I need some time to think." I felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by the reality of our situation. "Do what you need to do, Julia. I just want what's best for the kids." "Of course," she said. "I'll always be their mother. No matter what happens between us, I'll always be there for them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet house, feeling the full weight of our broken marriage. The divorce proceedings moved forward, each step a painful reminder of what we had lost. There were meetings with Sarah, exchanges of documents, and discussions about custody arrangements and financial settlements. One afternoon, as Sarah and I were going over the final details, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Anthony, have you considered counseling? Even if it's just for yourself, it might help you process everything you're going through." I shook my head. "I don't know. I've always thought I could handle things on my own." "Sometimes talking to someone can make a big difference," she said gently. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. I nodded slowly, taking her words to heart. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time to let someone in, to help me navigate this painful chapter of my life. As the legalities and logistics of the divorce drew to a close, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The nightmare was ending, but so was the life I had known for so long. All that was left was to pick up the pieces and find a way to move forward, one step at a time. The days blurred together in a monotonous routine of work and sleepless nights. The house felt emptier than ever, each room a reminder of Julia's absence. One evening, as I sat in the dimly lit living room, nursing a glass of whiskey, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But the persistent ringing compelled me to answer. I opened the door to find Karen, Julia's sister, standing on the porch. Her eyes were filled with concern, her expression soft and empathetic. Karen had always been the kind, level-headed one, a stark contrast to Julia's more passionate and impulsive nature. "Karen," I said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "I heard about the divorce," she said softly, stepping inside. "I wanted to see how you're doing." I hesitated, my initial reluctance warring with a need for human connection. Finally, I nodded and gestured for her to sit down. "Can I get you something to drink?" "A cup of tea would be nice," she replied. I went to the kitchen, grateful for the distraction. As I prepared the tea, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Karen's visit was unexpected, but there was a strange comfort in her presence. When I returned to the living room, she was looking around, her eyes lingering on the family photos that still adorned the walls. "Thank you," she said, taking the cup from me. "How are you holding up, Anthony?" I sighed, sinking into the armchair across from her. "Honestly, not great. It's been tough." Karen nodded, her gaze sympathetic. "I can't imagine what you're going through." "I'm so sorry, Anthony." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Then Karen spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "Anthony, I think you deserve to know the truth about Julia and Gabriel." I looked at her, a mixture of curiosity and dread. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Julia never really let go of Gabriel. Even after she married you, a part of her was still tied to him. I should have seen it coming." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. Karen shook her head. "I don't know the exact details, but I've always suspected she had unresolved feelings for him. When Gabriel came back into her life, it was like all those old emotions resurfaced. She tried to fight it, but in the end, she couldn't." "Why didn't she tell me?" I asked, anger and hurt mingling in my chest. "Why did she have to lie and deceive me?" Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have an answer for that, Anthony. I wish I did. Julia made her choices, and they were wrong. But I believe she never intended to hurt you. She was just lost." I shook my head, trying to process her words. "It doesn't make it any easier." "I know," Karen said softly, "but I thought you should know the truth. You deserve that much." We talked for hours, delving into the intricacies of Julia's relationship with Gabriel and the impact it had on our marriage. Karen's honesty was a balm to my wounded pride, providing clarity and understanding where there had been only confusion and pain. "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen looked at me, her expression sad but resolute. "I don't know, Anthony. But if she does, it will be because she's finally figured out what she wants. And you need to decide what you want, too." Her words lingered in my mind long after she left. Karen's visit had been unexpected, but it was exactly what I needed. She had given me the gift of truth, allowing me to see the situation with fresh eyes. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a strange sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew that healing would take time, but with the support of friends and family, I could begin to rebuild my life, one step at a time. Life had to go on, even when it felt like everything was falling apart. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with emptiness. Julia's departure had left a void, but wallowing in misery wasn't going to change anything. I needed a purpose, something to distract me from the turmoil inside. That's when I decided to throw myself into my work. I managed the produce section at a local supermarket, a job that had always brought me a sense of satisfaction. There was something soothing about the routine, the fresh smell of fruits and vegetables, the rhythmic stacking of crates, the friendly banter with regular customers. It was a simple life, but it grounded me. One morning, as I was arranging a display of oranges, I noticed Mr. Parker, the store manager, approaching. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with a stern but fair demeanor. He rarely ventured into the produce section, so his presence immediately caught my attention. "Anthony, can I have a word with you in my office?" he asked, his tone serious yet not unfriendly. "Sure, Mr. Parker," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron and following him. His office was cluttered with papers and binders, a testament to the many years he had spent running the store. He gestured for me to sit down and took a seat behind his desk. "Anthony, I've been observing your work, and I have to say, you've been doing an excellent job," he began. "Your dedication and attention to detail haven't gone unnoticed." "Thank you, Mr. Parker," I said, feeling a mix of pride and curiosity about where this conversation was heading. "We're expanding," he continued. "A new store is opening on the other side of town, and we need someone experienced to manage it. I'd like to offer you the position of store manager." I was taken aback. The offer was unexpected, but it felt like a lifeline thrown to me in a sea of chaos. "Wow, Mr. Parker, I don't know what to say. Thank you for considering me for this opportunity. It's well-deserved, Anthony. The new position comes with more responsibility, but I believe you're more than capable. What do you think?" I thought about it for a moment. The promotion meant a significant change, more hours, and greater demands, but it also offered a much-needed distraction from my personal life. It was a fresh start, something I desperately needed. "I'd be honored to take on the role, Mr. Parker. I'm ready for the challenge," I replied with newfound determination. "Good to hear," he said, a rare smile crossing his face. "We'll start the transition process next week. I'm confident you'll do great." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I spent my days at the new store, overseeing renovations, hiring staff, and setting up the various departments. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. It gave me a sense of purpose, something to focus on other than the pain of my failed marriage. One evening, after a particularly long day, I decided to grab a drink at the local pub. As I sat at the bar, nursing a beer, I noticed a familiar face walk in. Lucy, one of the new hires at the store. She was a diligent worker, always punctual and meticulous in her tasks. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, smiling as she approached. "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the empty stool next to me. She ordered a drink and turned to me, her eyes filled with curiosity. "So, how are you finding the new store?" "It's a lot of work," I admitted, "but it's a good distraction. Keeps my mind off things." She nodded, understanding. "I've heard about your situation. I'm sorry you're going through this, Anthony." "Thanks, Lucy. It's been tough, but I'm managing," I said, appreciating her concern. We fell into a comfortable conversation, talking about work, life, and everything in between. Lucy was easy to talk to, her presence a welcome reprieve from the loneliness that had settled in my heart. As the night wore on, I found myself laughing and enjoying her company more than I had expected. "You know," she said, taking a sip of her drink, "sometimes the hardest times in our lives can lead to the most significant changes. Maybe this new job is a turning point for you." Her words resonated with me. She was right. This promotion, this fresh start, could be the beginning of a new chapter in my life. It wouldn't erase the past, but it could help me build a future. I think you're right, Lucy, I said, feeling the glimmer of hope. Here's to new beginnings. We clinked our glasses, and in that moment, I felt a sense of optimism that had been absent for too long. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it, one step at a time. The new store was a whirlwind of activity from the moment we opened the doors. There was an electric energy in the air, a sense of purpose that kept everyone on their toes. It was during one of those bustling nights that I met Lucy. She was the supervisor of the night stocking crew, a role that required both efficiency and leadership. From the outset, it was clear that she was well suited for the job. She had a way of commanding respect without raising her voice, her team following her lead with a quiet dedication. Our initial interactions were purely professional. We coordinated schedules, discussed inventory, and handled the inevitable hiccups that came with opening a new store. But beneath the surface, there was an undeniable spark between us. I found myself looking forward to our nightly meetings, drawn to her dry wit and easy confidence. One night, as I was finishing up some paperwork in my office, Lucy knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe with a casual grace. "Sure, come in," I replied, setting aside the stack of invoices I had been sorting through. She took a seat across from me, her eyes scanning the cluttered desk. "You know, for someone who's so organized on the floor, your office is a disaster." I chuckled, appreciating her bluntness. "Yeah, well, I like to keep you all guessing." She smiled, a genuine, warm expression that lit up her face. "So, I was thinking, the team has been working really hard, and I thought it might be nice to do something to boost morale. Maybe a small get-together after work." "That's a great idea," I said, impressed by her initiative. "Do you have something in mind? How about we all grab a drink at the tavern? It's close by, and they have a decent menu." "Sounds perfect. I'll make sure to spread the word." As the night went on, the idea of the get-together took shape, and before long, we had a plan. The following evening, after the last customer had left, and the store was locked up, a group of us headed to the tavern. It was a cozy, dimly lit place with a welcoming atmosphere. Lucy and I ended up sitting next to each other at one end of the table. The conversation flowed easily, moving from work topics to more personal stories. I learned that she was originally from a small town upstate, had moved to the city for better opportunities, and was passionate about photography in her spare time. "So, what about you?" she asked, her eyes curious. "What do you do when you're not running this place?" I hesitated for a moment, thinking about how much to share. "Well, I used to spend a lot of time with my family. My kids are in college now, so I try to visit them when I can. Other than that, I guess I'm still figuring it out." She nodded, her expression understanding. "I heard about your divorce. I'm really sorry, Anthony." "Thanks," I said, appreciating her sympathy. "It's been rough, but I'm managing. This job has been a good distraction." "Distractions can be good," she said, raising her glass, "but they can also be temporary. It's important to find something that truly makes you happy." Her words struck a chord with me. "What about you? What makes you happy, Lucy?" She smiled, a faraway look in her eyes. "Photography, mostly. Capturing moments, telling stories through images. There's something magical about freezing a moment in time." "I'd love to see some of your work," I said, genuinely interested. "Maybe I'll show you sometime," she replied, a hint of playfulness in her voice. As the night wore on, the group began to thin out, and soon it was just Lucy and me. We moved to a quieter corner of the bar, continuing our conversation. There was an ease between us, a natural connection that felt both new and familiar. "Why did you move here?" I asked, curious about her story. "From what you've said, it sounds like you had a pretty good life upstate." She sighed, taking a sip of her drink. "I needed a change. I loved my hometown, but it was small, and I felt like I was missing out on something bigger. So I took a chance and moved here. It hasn't been easy, but I don't regret it." I know what you mean, I said, thinking about my own life changes. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. She smiled, her eyes meeting mine. Exactly. As the evening turned into night, we eventually decided to call it a day. I walked her to her car, the cool night air refreshing after the warmth of the bar. Thanks for tonight, I said as we reached her car. I really enjoyed it. Me too, she replied, a soft smile playing on her lips. We should do this again sometime. I'd like that, I said, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. As I watched her drive away, I couldn't help but feel that this was the start of something new. Our connection had deepened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Life was still full of uncertainties, but with Lucy in the picture, it seemed a little brighter. After a particularly grueling day at the store, I found myself longing for a break from the relentless pace of work. Lucy must have sensed it too, because she suggested we grab dinner at a little Italian place she loved. It wasn't planned, but the idea felt right. We both needed a respite, and the prospect of spending time together outside of work was enticing. We met at Trattoria Luca, a quaint restaurant with checkered tablecloths and soft, ambient lighting. The warm, inviting atmosphere was a welcome contrast to the fluorescent lights and constant hum of the supermarket. Wow, this place is charming, I said as we were shown to our table. How did you find it? Lucy smiled, a light in her eyes. I stumbled upon it a few months ago. It's become my go-to spot when I need to unwind. As we settled into our seats and perused the menu, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a casual dinner. It felt like a date, though neither of us labeled it as such. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared anticipation of what the evening might bring. After we ordered, Lucy leaned back in her chair, her eyes meeting mine. So, Anthony, tell me more about yourself. What did you want to be when you were a kid? I chuckled, surprised by the question. Honestly, I wanted to be an astronaut. I was obsessed with space, had posters of the moon landing and everything. She laughed, a melodic sound that made me smile. That's adorable. What happened to that dream? Reality, I guess, I said, shrugging. Life took me in a different direction, but I still love looking at the stars. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. There's something magical about the night sky. It makes you realize how small we are, but also how connected. What about you, Lucy? I asked, genuinely curious. What did you dream of becoming? A photographer, she said without hesitation. I've always been fascinated by the power of images, how they can capture a moment, tell a story, evoke emotions. That's beautiful, I said, admiring her passion. Do you still pursue it? Whenever I can, she replied. It's harder now with work, but I try to make time for it. It keeps me grounded. As our conversation flowed, we delved deeper into our lives, sharing dreams, fears, and past experiences. I told her about my kids, Kevin and Marcus, and the joy they brought me despite the pain of the divorce. She shared stories of her family, her move to the city, and the challenges she faced along the way. You know, she said, stirring her pasta thoughtfully, it's not easy starting over in a new place, but I've learned a lot about myself in the process. I can relate, I said, thinking about my own journey. This new job, this new phase of my life, it's been a challenge, but it's also been an opportunity to grow. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, a comforting gesture that sent a warmth through me. You're doing great, Anthony. You've been through so much, but you're still standing. That's something to be proud of. Thanks, Lucy, I said, squeezing her hand gently. Your support means a lot, more than you know. As the evening wore on, the connection between us deepened. There was a sense of ease, of understanding, that made me feel more alive than I had in months. Lucy was a breath of fresh air, her presence a balm to my wounded soul. When the meal ended, we lingered over coffee, reluctant to let the night end. I had a really good time tonight, Lucy said, her eyes sparkling. Me too, I replied, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since Julia's betrayal. We should do this again. I'd like that, she said, a smile playing on her lips. We walked out of the restaurant together, the cool night air invigorating. As we stood by our cars, there was a moment of hesitation, a silent question hanging between us. "Good night, Anthony," she said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Good night, Lucy," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. As I drove home, I couldn't help but reflect on the evening. Lucy was more than a colleague. She was becoming a significant part of my life. The thought of falling for her scared me, but it also filled me with a sense of excitement and possibility. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Lucy by my side, it seemed a little brighter. She was a breath of fresh air, and I found myself looking forward to the journey, one step at a time. With Lucy by my side, the weight of the past began to lift. Her presence was a constant reminder that life could still hold joy and promise. It wasn't long before we decided to take a significant step forward, moving in together. Selling the old house was a bittersweet experience. The walls had witnessed both our happiest moments and the painful unraveling of our marriage. Walking through the empty rooms one last time, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with a sense of liberation. It was time to close that chapter and embrace a new beginning. "Are you sure about this?" Lucy asked, her eyes searching mine as we stood in the empty living room. "Yes," I said, squeezing her hand. "It's time to move on. This place holds too many memories, and we need a fresh start." The sale went through smoothly, and we found a cozy apartment near my new store. It was smaller than the house, but felt perfect for us. The process of moving in was both exhausting and exhilarating. We spent weekends painting walls, assembling furniture, and turning the apartment into a home. One Saturday afternoon, as we were unpacking boxes, Lucy held up a framed photo of my kids. "Where should we put this?" I smiled, taking the picture from her. "How about the mantel?" "It's a good spot, right in the center." "Perfect," she said, handing me a hammer and nail. "They need to be part of our new life too." We worked side by side, the rhythm of our movements in sync. There was a sense of unity, a feeling that we were building something meaningful together. The apartment slowly transformed, each room reflecting our combined tastes and personalities. "Hey, Anthony," Lucy called from the kitchen, where she was arranging the new dishes we had bought. "What do you think about hosting a housewarming party? Just a small gathering with close friends and family." "I think it's a great idea," I replied, joining her. It would be nice to celebrate our new beginning. As we planned the party, I felt a sense of excitement that had been missing for a long time. We made a list of guests, chose a menu, and even debated over decorations. It was a small but significant step in moving forward, embracing our new life together. The day of the party arrived, and our apartment was filled with laughter and warmth. Friends and family mingled, offering congratulations and best wishes. Karen, Julia's sister, was among the guests. She pulled me aside at one point, a sincere smile on her face. "I'm really happy for you, Anthony," she said. "Lucy seems wonderful, and you both look so happy together." "Thanks, Karen," I replied, genuinely touched. "Your support means a lot." "How's Julia?" Karen's smile faltered slightly. "She's doing okay. It's been tough for her too, but she's trying to move on. I think she's happy for you, in her own way." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. I hope she finds her own path to happiness. As the evening wound down, Lucy and I sat on the couch, surrounded by the remnants of the party. The apartment felt warm and lived in, filled with the echoes of our guests' laughter and well wishes. "This feels right, doesn't it?" Lucy said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "It does," I agreed, wrapping my arm around her. "I haven't felt this content in a long time." "We're building something good here," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. I'm excited for our future. Me too, I said, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. As we settled into our new routine, life slowly started to look brighter. I began to enjoy the simple pleasures of decorating our place, planning for the future, and sharing my life with Lucy. The apartment became a haven, a place where we could escape the outside world and focus on each other. One evening, as we sat on the balcony, watching the sunset, Lucy turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. Have you thought about what you want to do next? Beyond work, I mean. I considered her question, feeling a sense of openness that was new to me. I've been thinking about taking up some old hobbies, maybe start stargazing again, or even take a photography class with you. Her face lit up. I'd love that. We could explore new places, capture moments together. It sounds perfect. As we talked about our plans and dreams, I realized how far I had come since the days of despair and uncertainty. With Lucy by my side, I was rediscovering parts of myself that I had long forgotten. The future was no longer a daunting expanse, but a canvas waiting to be filled with new experiences and shared joys. Moving on wasn't easy, but with each passing day, it became a little more possible. Lucy was more than a companion. She was my partner, my confidant, my anchor. Together, we were creating a life filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The winter chill had settled in, bringing with it the festive spirit of the holiday season. Lucy and I decided to go shopping for Christmas gifts, a task that filled me with a surprising amount of excitement. We bundled up in our warmest coats and headed to the local mall, where the stores were adorned with twinkling lights and festive decorations. As we walked through the bustling crowd, hand in hand, we laughed and talked about our plans for the holidays. It was a stark contrast to the loneliness I had felt the previous year, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for Lucy's presence in my life. Let's start at Target, Lucy suggested. They usually have a great selection of gifts, and I need to pick up a few things for the house. Sounds good, I agreed, squeezing her hand. Lead the way. We made our way to Target, the store a hive of activity as people hurried about, checking off their holiday shopping lists. As we browsed the aisles, Lucy picked out a few decorations, and I found some toys for my nephews. I think we've got everything, Lucy said, glancing at her list. Let's head to the checkout. As we approached the customer service counter, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The woman behind the counter, her back turned as she helped a customer, looked oddly familiar. When she finally turned around, our eyes met, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Julia. She looked thinner and more worn out than I remembered, her eyes lacking the spark they once had. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the noise and bustle of the store fading into the background. It was as if time had slowed, and all the unresolved emotions from our past came rushing back. Anthony, she said softly, her voice tinged with surprise and something else. Regret, perhaps. Julia, I replied, unable to mask the shock in my voice. Lucy, sensing the tension, squeezed my hand. Is this? Yes, I said, my gaze still locked with Julia's. This is Julia. Julia looked at Lucy, her expression unreadable. Hi, I'm Julia, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Hi, I'm Lucy, she replied, her tone calm and steady. Nice to meet you. The awkwardness of the situation was palpable. Julia seemed unsure of what to say next, and I could see the discomfort in her eyes. Finally, she glanced at her coworker and muttered, "Excuse me," before retreating into the office behind the counter. Lucy and I stood there for a moment, processing the encounter. It was jarring, to say the least, but as the initial shock wore off, I felt a sense of clarity. "Are you okay?" Lucy asked, concern evident in her voice. "Yeah," I said, taking a deep breath. It was just unexpected. We continued our shopping in silence, but my mind kept drifting back to Julia. Seeing her had stirred up old memories, but it also reaffirmed my belief that moving on was the right decision. Julia's presence in my life had been a chapter that needed to close, and Lucy was the new beginning I had been searching for. That evening, as we sat by the fire, wrapping gifts and sipping hot cocoa, I felt a sense of peace. The encounter with Julia had been a reminder of how far I had come and how much I had gained. "Thank you for being here with me," I said, looking at Lucy. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You don't have to thank me, Anthony. We're in this together." We continued wrapping gifts, our conversation light and filled with laughter. As the night went on, the memory of Julia's worn-out face faded, replaced by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. Running into the past had been a test, but it had also been a confirmation. My life with Lucy was filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The day of our wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect reflection of the hope and joy I felt in my heart. Lucy and I had opted for a small, intimate ceremony, inviting only our closest friends and family. It was a simple affair, held in the garden of a quaint bed and breakfast that we had both fallen in love with. As I stood at the altar, surrounded by blooming flowers and the soft hum of nature, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. Just a few years ago, my life had been in shambles, and now here I was, ready to start a new chapter with the woman who had brought so much light back into my life. The music began, and I looked up to see Lucy walking down the aisle, her smile radiant and her eyes sparkling with happiness. She wore a simple white dress that flowed gracefully as she moved, her hair adorned with delicate flowers. She was breathtaking. When she reached me, I took her hands in mine, feeling the warmth and love radiating from her. The officiant, a close friend of Lucy's, began the ceremony with heartfelt words about love, commitment, and new beginnings. "Do you, Anthony, take Lucy to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," I said, my voice steady and full of conviction. "And do you, Lucy, take Anthony to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," she replied, her eyes never leaving mine. "With the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." I leaned in and kissed Lucy, a sweet and tender moment that felt like the culmination of all our struggles and triumphs. The small crowd erupted in applause, their joy and support enveloping us in a warm embrace. The reception was held in a cozy dining room, decorated with twinkling lights and fresh flowers. Laughter and conversation filled the air as we celebrated with our loved ones. My sons, Kevin and Marcus, were there, beaming with happiness. It meant the world to me to have them present on this special day. During the dinner, Kevin stood up to give a toast. "Dad, I'm so happy for you," he began, raising his glass. "Seeing you and Lucy together has been amazing. You've been through a lot, but you've come out stronger. Here's to new beginnings and a future filled with love and happiness. Cheers," everyone echoed, clinking their glasses together. Later, as the evening wound down, Marcus approached me with a smile. "Dad, I have to say, Lucy is great. She's brought out a side of you that I haven't seen in years. I'm really happy for you." "Thanks, Marcus," I said, feeling a surge of emotion. "It means a lot to hear that from you. You and Kevin have been my rock through everything." In the weeks and months that followed, Lucy and I settled into our new life together. We created routines that brought us closer, from morning coffee on the balcony to evening walks in the park. We spent weekends exploring new places, capturing moments with her camera, and making memories that would last a lifetime. My relationship with Kevin and Marcus continued to improve as well. They visited often, and we shared many family dinners filled with laughter and stories. They were happy to see me in a healthier, more positive place, and our bond grew stronger as a result. One evening, as Lucy and I were sitting on the couch, looking through a photo album she had made of our wedding day, I felt a deep sense of contentment. "Can you believe how far we've come?" I asked, smiling at a picture of us dancing. "It's been quite the journey," she replied, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But I wouldn't change a thing. Every step led us here, to this moment." "I love you, Lucy," I said, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you for being my partner, my confidant, and my best friend." "I love you too, Anthony," she said softly. "Here's to many more years of happiness and adventure." As we sat there, surrounded by the memories of our special day and the promise of a bright future, I knew that we had truly found our fresh start. Together, we had built a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace, ready to embrace whatever the future held with Lucy by my side. Months after our wedding, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucy and I were enjoying our new life together, filled with laughter, love, and shared dreams. One crisp autumn afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail that stirred up old memories: the final divorce papers from Julia. Though it was just a formality, holding those papers in my hands felt like a tangible symbol of closure. The journey to this point had been long and arduous, filled with pain, growth, and ultimately, new beginnings. I sat at the kitchen table, the papers spread out before me. Lucy was in the living room, curled up with a book. I called out to her, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Lucy, can you come here for a moment?" She looked up, concern flashing in her eyes as she walked over. "What is it, Anthony?" I held up the papers. "It's the final divorce papers from Julia. I need to sign them." She sat down beside me, placing her hand on mine. "How do you feel about it?" I took a deep breath, reflecting on the journey I had been through. It's strange. On one hand, it's just a piece of paper. But on the other, it feels like the final chapter of a book I've been writing for years. Signing these means truly letting go of the past. Lucy nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've come a long way, Anthony. You've rebuilt your life from the ground up. This is just one more step in moving forward." Her words resonated with me, providing the clarity I needed. I picked up the pen, hesitating for a moment before putting it to the paper. As I signed my name, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "There," I said, exhaling deeply. "It's done." Lucy squeezed my hand, a proud smile on her face. "I'm so proud of you. You've been incredibly strong through all of this." "Thank you, Lucy," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you. Your support means everything to me." We sat in silence for a moment, the significance of the moment sinking in. The past was finally behind me, and the future looked promising. With Lucy by my side, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. "I think we should celebrate," Lucy said, her eyes twinkling. "How about a nice dinner out? Just the two of us." "I'd like that," I replied, feeling a sense of excitement. "Let's make it a night to remember." That evening, we went to our favorite restaurant, a cozy little place with delicious food and a warm atmosphere. We toasted to new beginnings, enjoying each other's company and reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. As we walked home, hand in hand, I felt a profound sense of peace. The moon was full, casting a soft glow over the city streets. We stopped by the park, sitting on a bench and watching the world go by. "You know," I said, turning to Lucy, "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again. After everything that happened, I was so lost. But you helped me find my way." She smiled, her eyes shining with love. "And you helped me find mine, Anthony. We're in this together, now and always." I leaned in and kissed her, feeling the depth of our connection. As we sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew that we had truly found our place in the world. The past was a part of me, but it no longer defined me. With Lucy, I had found not just a fresh start, but a future filled with endless possibilities. The next morning, I mailed the signed papers back to the lawyer, feeling a final sense of closure. It was done. That chapter of my life was officially over. Lucy and I continued to build our life together, creating new memories and planning for the future. We talked about traveling, maybe starting a family of our own, and all the adventures that lay ahead. As we stood on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sunrise, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had taken me on a tumultuous journey, but it had led me to this moment of peace and fulfillment. "Here's to us," I said, raising my coffee cup in a toast. "To us," Lucy replied, clinking her cup against mine, "and to the wonderful future we're going to build together." With Lucy's support and love, I had found my way back to happiness. The past was behind me, and the future looked bright. And as we stood there, basking in the morning light, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together, hand in hand.